Hi, this is Steve Keirn, formerly of Fabulous One, Skinner, Doink the Clown, agent, FCW instructor, wrestling guru. But when I want to know something, I listen to Wrestling Nostalgia. That's where you get all the right information and you hear the real deal. Big Dave.
This is Wrestling Nostalgia with Dave Dynasty. Greetings and welcome to Wrestling Nostalgia, the wrestling history podcast. I am your host, Dave Dynasty. Thank you for joining us. We have a great interview on this episode with Steve Keirn, former member of the Fabulous Ones, and of course Skinner and WWE. It's a great interview, hour long, lots of good stories. Steve's a great guest. Thank you for coming on. I appreciate him being on. Before we dive into that, just a couple things that, of course, everybody's talking about. Terry Funk passed away on August 23rd, 2023 at age 79. Not much more to say about him. I put out a short episode kind of remembering Terry and speaking personally from my experience and as a fan and watching him. One of the greatest of all time. Argument, I think can be made for, no one's going to argue if you call him the greatest of all time. So what a one of a kind guy. And then also on August 24th, 2023, Bray Wyatt, or Wyndham Rotunda, passed away at age 36. I wasn't a huge Bray Wyatt fan, but I appreciated the character. I appreciated the vision, right? The creativity. There were times where I really liked Bray Wyatt, but then some of it, not so much. I did appreciate the horror elements. I'm a big horror movie fan. When he had the mask, it was done by Tom Savini's team, and and I appreciate that horror stuff. That's pretty cool to me. And it's neat to see someone in that position that's a fellow horror movie fan. But 36 years old, man, that's young. He's got a family, kids. Still had the prime of his life ahead of him. So that's tough, man, and that's wild. WWE did a nice tribute. It's just, what do you say, right? I mean, like I said, I wasn't a big Bray Wyatt fan, but that doesn't mean that, it's not a sad situation. That really breaks my heart. But anyway, they'll both be missed. Both, great minds and great talents in wrestling. But that's about all I've got here to kick off the show. Not a lot. I really want to just dive into the Steve Keirn interview. So let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll have that interview itself. If you like horror movies, be sure to check out Dave Dynasty and Ike Isaacs on the Listen to Their Screams Horror Podcast. It is available on all podcast platforms and on social media at Listen to Screams. That is Listen, the number 2, and Screams. All right, and we're back here on Wrestling Nostalgia. I am your host, Dave Dynasty, and it's my honor to be joined by Steve Keirn. Steve, how are you?
I'm great, Dave. How you doing, buddy?
I'm good. I'm glad to have you on. I appreciate you giving us your time. And I'm
thank you.
Looking forward to chatting some wrestling with you. Before we dive into your career and everything else, I just got to ask you right up front. I don't know if you've heard the news. Hopefully I'm not breaking this to you.
Yeah.
But just today,
I know.
Terry Funk passed away.
Yeah.
I'd like to hear your feedback, man. This is not just this is Terry Funk. This is something else.
Well, this is kind of hard because Ted DiBiase is who called me.
Yeah.
And Teddy and I are real close. And Terry had a lot to do with his career. And so he called me and told me, and I hadn't been on the internet all day long, so I really wasn't aware of it. But almost every day I hear some news. And then I also saw where Abe Jacobs had passed away, and I was familiar with him too. But, when Terry Funk first started getting sick and started getting put into retirement home, and then needed assistance and everything. Number one, his wife had passed away.
Yeah.
And so the same scenario with Harley Race, who was another one of the greatest, and taught me so much. Both of these guys were NWA World Heavyweight Champions, and I wrestled them both. And at a peak of my career, long before I went away and did the Fabulous One gimmick or Skinner or anything, but at the peak of my career, when I was really in my heyday, in my late 20s, I'm wrestling Terry Funk and Harley Race, and to see them in similar was kind of sad because of the fact that both of them's wife died prior to them dying. Then they slowly kind of like got a little bit more disabled, a little bit more disabled. Then it was like things like Alzheimer's hitting them. And then I can remember going up to Harley, and he was in a wheelchair. And, I loved Harley to death. I mean, he was so instrumental in my career. And, hey, Harley, how's it going? He looked at me, he just goes, who are you? I'm going, sad. But
Yeah.
here's what I said to Ted. For the fans that are listening, I hope they get this. It's not that this is a bad thing, but they're both in better place. And I'm a Christian, and I'm a follower of Jesus, and so is Ted DiBiase. And one thing for sure, 1 out of 1 people are going to die, and it's just when. But in the condition they were in, their quality of life wasn't what it used to be, and it's sad. But at the same time, to me, I smiled because I'm thinking, Terry probably a lot happier. He just saw his wife, and he's in heaven, and instead of an old folks home trying to figure out where the hell he's at. But anyway, that's my thoughts on Terry, and I got a lot of Terry Funk stories. I taught him how to scuba dive when I was only 16 years old. I used to pick the guys up from the airport here. Eddie Graham gave me a job. He kind of took over a fatherly image for me because my dad was a prisoner in Vietnam, and he gave me a job picking up the wrestlers that flew in. And Terry was one that flew in, and he stayed in a really cheap hotel, but it had a swimming pool. And I said, I could teach you to scuba dive in that pool. and the look the guy gave me, and I was 16 years old, and he was just a kid too. And he's going like, really? And next thing I know, we're in a swimming pool, and like he's freaking out. It was like, it was really nothing, no big deal, but it was something I'd never forget in my life,
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you can't. I mean, Terry Funk had a full life. I mean, there's not many that's accomplished more than he did for as long as he did, and he did it his way, right? He'll
often be imitated, but he'll never be duplicated.
Absolutely,
there'll never be another Terry Funk. He was like one of those guys, a 1 in a million. One of the guys that I grew up with here in Tampa that got into wrestling with myself and Austin Idol and Hulk Hogan and Mike Graham and Dick Slater. We all got in there together. But Dick Slater idolized Terry Funk and even imitated him.
Yeah.
He would do a lot of imitation of Terry Funk stuff. I mean, the way he shrugged his shoulders, whatever it was. But I mean, I saw it because I knew Dick Slater since we were little kids. So you didn't do that when we were in high school.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
I didn't mean to get up too far off.
No. That's what we're here for. That's what we're here for. And you mentioned all these guys and mentioned kicking in, and you have a book out now called The Keirn Chronicles, Volume 1. So, what made you feel that now's the time to write a book?
Well, it was a bunch of input from people around me, from my grandchildren. I got 5 grandchildren that are growing really quick. I'm at a point in my life where being retired and I have no obligation and I have no boss but God and my wife. And I've got a lot of free time, and they want me to tell them stories about wrestling. Then they meet all my friends. There's 40 of us that live here in Tampa. We eat lunch 2 or 3 times a month. We get together, at least 20 of us at a time. So they know about the wrestling, so they want to learn. So I'm thinking, I'm going to turn 72 in September, and the clock's ticking.
Yep.
And if I don't leave some of my stories and some of what my life was, it wasn't all glitz and glamour. There's, good and bad and a lot of experience in there. But at the same time, I didn't try to embellish my story by saying, how great I was or how the attendance was sold out because we're in the main event, or I just told the story.
Yeah.
And I mean, and I've gotten a lot of compliments on it, but the concept is that my friends, my own peers were saying, man, you got to write a book. Man, I can tell stories about my experience with Steve Keirn. Can you imagine your experiences as Steve Keirn? You're the Kevin Bacon of professional wrestling. If you didn't rub shoulders with Steve Keirn sometime in your career, you weren't in professional wrestling.
Yeah.
So, and it kind of kept striking me. But here's where I kept going, Dave. I kept going because I'm a realist. The
Mm-hmm.
whole thing to me, it's a work, and the whole thing, so far as Hall of Fames, from start to finish, this is the production, and it's a work.
Yeah.
And so I didn't want to come across any negative. And when my friends are telling me, man, you got to write a book. And then here they want to tell me, they say, well, you got to tell the story about when you painted knobs up on the airplane when he passed out, and you painted his face and you painted his fingernails. And I'm going, yeah, those are some good ones. But then some of them were borderline. And I'm going, wait a minute, whoa, I can't tell that story. My wife proofread the first reading of the book, and she comes in the living room and she says to me, she goes, there's no way in hell you're going to leave this line in there. And it had to do with something, that I was approached, proposition for in a territory by a gay promoter. And she goes, you can't even write this. And so, that came out right away. And it really, when she read it back to me, I'm going like, yeah, I can't believe my writer's name is Ian Douglas, and he's phenomenal. He's written 5 wrestlers books, and he just wrote another book, The Bohemian Rhapsody, The History of Pro Wrestling in the Bahamas, which is a phenomenal book.
Yeah.
Actually, I did the foreword in that book for him. But with all that being said, everybody kind of convinced me to write a book. And what I was saying about realists is I'm not a major player so far as a Ric Flair, a Stone Cold, a Rock, a Hulk Hogan, but I'm just one of those soldiers that went through the business for 44 years.
Yeah.
But the secret to my success was I was low key, except for a couple of times that I got a little bit too boisterous, and I had to move on. But but to tell the story, it was interesting, and a lot of people have given me so many compliments about when they start the book, they can't put it down.
Yeah.
And can my son read it? Can my granddaughter? Yeah, I got 5, so it had to come grandkid approved.
Yeah. I love the fact your wife did the first proofread.
Oh, well, she was making sure, because if she doesn't trust me, we've been married 43 years, and she's at choir practice right now. But I'll tell you the truth, I'm smart enough to know how I made 43 years of a marriage too, because she cracks the whip and I make the trip, brother. It's as simple as that.
That's right.
And there's no argument. There's not going to be some macho man standing up saying, oh yeah, I rule this house. Yeah, rule. You don't rule anything, brother. Yeah. You're just lucky to be here. So
yeah,
no, well, I'm blessed. I'm really happy, and I'm so at peace, Dave. So
that's good.
I'm a very blessed guy. So
well, that's good. Like I said, I mean, everybody needs to go out and get the book, right? We're not gonna spill everything in this in our talk, because I want people to buy your book, and I want to hear a lot of stories from you, right? And support you in this book, because, like I said, it's a volume 1. We want to get a volume 2. So everybody needs to buy the book and support that. So
I appreciate that. And you can get it on Amazon. That's really the only place.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little about your career. You broke in Florida, which, right, everybody associates Steve Keirn with Florida, first and foremost. Yeah. So tell me what it's like training there, because you hear a lot of stories, about Hiro Matsuda and all that, and how tough it was. But what was it like training in Florida?
Well, I'll try to keep this short and brief, but I didn't really grow up wanting to be a pro wrestler. I mean, and when it really came time, I had given everything else a try. I'd tried college, I'd tried, education and things, and because I was around Eddie and I was around the wrestlers from the time I was about 15 on, maybe even 14. I saw it different. They look beat up all the time. Mm-hmm. I mean, I saw some rough looking men. I mean, and they were battled. And I was really, when I was young, I was really cute. I mean, I should have been a male model. But my anticipation of being a pro wrestler was probably 0 by the time I made it to college. And anyway, I got in college and I got on some steroids with these guys at a YMCA there while at college, and started competing in powerlifting. I blew up and came home from 165 to 240. And when Eddie saw me, he freaked out. I mean, he was going like, I don't know if he saw dollar signs or what, but he's going, man, you sure you don't want to be in the business? And I'm going, no. And this is another thing that I witnessed, Dave, growing up, is I witnessed people coming to the sportatorium because I was on the inside with the family that would come there wanting to be wrestlers, and I witnessed them getting beat to shit. I mean, and that sportatorium there, they would put a chain around the doors, only set of doors going out. And when they got in there, they would shoot with these marks. And I'm sitting there as a kid, and nobody was smart in those days. Everybody was kayfabe. And I'm sitting there as a young kid watching guys just get beat up bad and screaming for their life. And I saw a guy get his arm broke, and and it's like, yeah, I don't think I want to be a pro wrestler. But times changed. Then when I got bigger, my choices. Somebody said, well, what do you want to be when you grow up, Steve? I said, I don't know. What makes money? You go, well, doctor, lawyer, Indian chief. Well, I guess those are all out. How about a pro wrestler? Yeah. So the start of pro wrestling in those days was different because we had kayfabe, and we were really trying to keep the mystique of what we were doing from the audience to make them more entertained. And that's the concept that I was educated on. But I was educated into a fraternity of people that you would die to protect the wrestling business. And Eddie Graham made it a point to tell you, you get into a bar anywhere in this city or anywhere in this state, and somebody says something about wrestling and you get into it because you're a wrestler, you better not lose. You better hurt somebody. And I mean, it was like, or you're not gonna be here. And then the training was, you go to a sportatorium to work out, and it's like 110 inside that building in the summer with no air conditioning, no windows, and you do free squats to a deck of cards. Then you would do push-ups, and you'd do neck bridges, then you'd run the ropes. By the time I actually wrestled anybody, my sister could whoop my ass. I mean, I was so out of gas. And Harold Matsuda would take you down, rub your face in the mat, stretch you. And here's the deal. Out of respect, he never did anything to me right in the center part of my face, like kick my teeth in or break my nose or anything. But I felt every other part of my body every day. And it was for almost 6 months. And when I'd come home, the only person at home was my mom. And my mom would look at me and she'd say, honey, what are you doing? And I said, Mom, I'm going to be a professional wrestler. And my mom's going, she's thinking I should have gone to the Air Force Academy, West Point, some military academy, because it follows my dad. And I go, I'm going to be a pro wrestler. She goes, well, honey, I thought that was fake. Oh. And I looked at her and I said to my mom's clear as I remember it like it was yesterday. So did I, Mom. But whatever the hell I'm doing down at that sportatorium, I'm telling you, this is real. Yeah. But what it did, that just built your background, and plus it also, the minute anybody would actually ruffle your feathers in those days and says, wrestling, that's all fake. Man, you're so enraged because what you went through to get in it, you're ready to kill them. Yeah. I mean, what a great psychology it was. But that's how you broke in Florida.
Yeah, yeah. You teamed a lot there those early days with Mike Graham. Talk to us.
I did.
Tell us about Mike Graham, because that's a name he's so underappreciated. Man, he was so talented.
He was. Mike, here's the deal. He's a second-generation wrestler. And then on top of all of that, his dad's a promoter and owns the territory. That's a curse of a curse. Yeah. I mean, even if you were the greatest talent, even if you were 6'7", 235 pounds of blue twisted steel and sex appeal, it doesn't matter. Your dad's still running the territory, so you're going to be in this territory forever.
Yeah.
And then, and you're going to always be included all the way to the semi or whatever. And so, here's where Mike was at, not because he's passed away and Steve's talking about Mike, but I can because I earned his respect. But Mike had a little man complex, and it's very understandable in this industry. Mm-hmm. Obviously not now. I mean, I'm measuring the guys by the top rope now, and I'm thinking about starting again. But it's, when I watch the matches, I watch the guys that, when they're hitting the ropes and if they're having to jump up to the top rope, I'm going, oh my God. Mike could have been Andre the Giant back then. But Mike was a power lifter also, and he was one of the strongest guys in the state of Florida. He minded himself on that small man thing with proving himself.
Yeah.
He always had to have, he did great in powerlifting, but he had to have the fastest car. He was into speed, the fastest boat. I rode in boats with him in Tampa Bay here where, you'd think you guys are nuts. Your guys are going 100 miles an hour in that boat. And Mike, he had no fear. But he was always looked upon as a small guy. Mm-hmm. And no matter how you cut it, here's what Eddie Graham used to say. And he was like, the genius of the business. He'd say, kid, the minute you step out of that back door, that curtain, down that ramp, no matter what it is, every man in that building's sizing you up. Everyone. And if they're not, I'd be surprised. But they're looking at it, I could take him. He don't look so tough. And when Mike would come to the audience, I'd think, a lot of guys are saying, well, like, he's kind of short. And then I remember Dennis Stamp one time, he only wrestled here in Florida for a short time, and he's from Minnesota. And he said to Mike, Mike, you're kind of short to be a wrestler, aren't you? And Mike had a classic comeback. This was Mike's return. He goes, well, when I stand on my wallet, I can look at the top of your head.
That's good.
No, Mike was a great talent. He was underrated, but it wasn't underrated.
Yeah.
Here's where you accept. It's like, I guess it was The Rock that has said, know your role.
Yeah.
You got to know your role.
Yeah.
Don't overshoot who you are. Just accept who you are and enjoy the ride. And I mean, when I became Skinner, people freaked out like, oh man, what happened to him? He's a shit. But that was the most fun of my life.
Yeah.
They didn't get it.
Yeah.
We're all of a sudden we're movie stars now, and I'm out of movie deliverance, and I'm doing my deal. Anyway.
Yeah.
Sorry, Dave.
No, that's all right. There's always a story. And I think you've told this before, but around 1978 or so, that you were considered to be the WWF champion. It was between you and Bob Backlund. What can you tell us about that? Is that true? What did you hear at that time, or what? Tell us from your side that story.
Well, here's the thing. And I heard Dusty's side. I've heard Kevin Sullivan's side. I never really got Eddie's side because he didn't talk about business. But I lived it. And the whole scenario was Bobby Backlund had come from Minnesota and they put him in Florida, get him a little bit more of an education with his work in the ring. And Bobby was very robotish is my term for that. He was very mechanical looking, no real fluid motion when he moved in the ring. He was like Lex Luger. I mean, their arms are locked and everything. He was a great wrestling shooter, but his personality needed some work. And they teamed him with me, of all people. Now, I teamed with Bobby for about 6 months. And then somewhere in there, and it's because of time and all the different stories, all I can say is what I heard was that Vince Sr. and Eddie Graham were trying to switch out some talent, and they wanted to do a deal where they needed a new champion up in the WWF or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And because there were nationalities that worked that territory, if people were familiar with the differences of territories, Florida was a wrestling territory. New York was a brawling nationality territory. You just needed to be from some country. So they needed a white meat baby face. Well, my dad and the history I had in Florida with drawing money with Bob Roop off of an angle, him calling my dad a coward who was a two-time prisoner of war, was a great angle, but it was also a set off for my career to show that I had potential and I had something to offer somebody if they wanted to pursue it. That was a real deal that audiences got captured by emotion with. And so Eddie's, was a really smart promoter, and they all listened to him. And Vince Sr., when they got together, who really knows the story? I can honestly say that it's hard to say. Kevin Sullivan said they made a $50 bet that Vince McMahon wanted Bobby Backlund. And Eddie Graham said, you're making a mistake. You should take Steve Keirn. Steve Keirn got a history already with drawing money off an American flag deal with his dad and the real deal, and they can look it all up. But I want a shooter, is what he said. He wanted a shooter, a white meat baby face that they could just do it. And Eddie Graham bet him $50 he couldn't get Bobby Backlund over. He said, you're making a big mistake. If you don't take Steve Keirn, I'll bet you $50 you'll never get Bobby Backlund over up there. And I'm giving you a short deal. Now, when I was in this whole thing going on, somewhere in the stage, and I'm not even sure because of the time deal, but it was right in that time period, Vince Sr. contacts me. And in those days, that kind of stuff didn't happen. You're in a territory of Florida. The promoter from the territory in New York doesn't call you.
Yeah.
And because you don't have cell phones on top of everything else, I mean, to get that tin can to work with the string to your house was a whole different thing too. So it's for him to actually call. And he asked me to drop a belt to Fujinami in Japan with New Japan Pro Wrestling, because he was trying to make a business connection between New Japan and WWF. So anyway, I got caught in the middle of that, and they sent me a world NWA World Junior Heavyweight title and had me drop it in Sapporo because that Leroy McGurk would not work with Vince Sr. and use that belt that he had out there. Vince just made one and said, Steve Keirn, you're the champion. Well, that's nice, Vince, but you don't know Japan. I got to Japan, and every Japanese reporter's go, oh, Steve Keirn, who you win the belt from? And I'm going, I just walk off. I mean, you're a heel anyway, but it was like, wait a minute, I didn't know anybody's going to ask me this question. I'm not Dave. I'm not beating around the bush. And here's what you really need to know is me. What did Steve want? Steve didn't want to go to New York.
Yeah.
I had no desire. Now, I know I would have made a lot more money. And of course, I've been that world champion up there and all that. But to me, this business is a work. Mm-hmm. And it being a work, you're gonna win a belt, but you're gonna lose a belt too eventually. And now you're stuck in New York. Now, I'm used to the Southeast. I'm used to the Georgia territory, Florida territory, Tennessee, Carolinas. When you got off the interstate, you got back on. When you go to New York and Boston and Philly and all of those areas up there, you don't just pull over and ask somebody for directions. Well, by the way, how do you get to Madison Square Gardens? Buy a map, asshole. That's what they tell you in New York.
Yeah.
I mean, so I'm so easy going and everything. And when they started telling me the towns, and they're going Philly Spectrum, Boston Gardens, Madison Square Gardens, and I'd already worked Madison Square Gardens. Dusty and I flew up out of Florida for events a couple of times, and I didn't want to go. I'll be honest. I knew it was passing up a big opportunity, but the opportunity never came up. It's not like, oh, wow, they took you and you didn't come. And no, they didn't take me. They took Bobby Backlund, and he did a good job, and he was their world champion. But better him than me, because New York's a long way from the beach, brother. Ask Don
Sure.
Morocco.
Yeah, sure. Well, let's skip ahead. Let's talk about the fabulous ones.
Right?
And so how did you and Stanley first get together?
Well, Stan and I had known each other, and well, I worked against him here in Florida when he first got started. He was real green and everything. He was with Brian St. John, I can't remember if they're the Hollywood Blondes or something along that line, but they didn't last long. And then, of course, we crossed paths again, and I think it was Georgia. But then we got into Tennessee. I got drafted into Tennessee with Kevin Sullivan off of TBS because I did an angle with him for the Georgia television title, and we did a babyface match on TBS, and it was nationwide then. And Kevin double-crossed me and turned heel on me and took the belt, and then he left the territory and he went to Jarrett's territory, and I followed him, and this was to see if people from Channel 17 TBS nationwide TV were following enough to carry the angle to a territory. Plus, Jerry Jarrett had Tommy Rich, and he had taken him for Barnett, and then he didn't want him, so he wanted to give him back to Barnett. And he came to the Omni and told Barnett, you can have Tommy Rich back. Just give me somebody to replace him. And Barnett said, you can take 2 of anybody on this card tonight. And Jerry Jarrett went out and watched me and Kevin Sullivan work our angle in the Omni. And we did a lot of hardcore up the stairs into the audience and everything. And he goes, I want them too. And then he approached us, and I didn't want to go to Tennessee. I told him right off the bat, I said, it's like, I've been in a few territories. I'm not like a green guy now. I've been around. I already heard you go to Tennessee, you'll never get over Lawler and Dundee. They got that place wrapped up tight. And he goes, no, it's not. That's not true. And I go, well, that's not what I've heard. So, then we had a little meeting of the minds, and he guaranteed me that we're going to be like that. But, they're all, here's the thing about promoters in those days. You had to learn that you have to work a worker. In other words, if he's working you, you're working him back. But you got to both act like you're not working each other. And I don't know if that makes any sense, but after you've been through a few territories and a few promoters, I used to say they got deep pockets and short fingers. And they go, you can't say that in the dressing room, Steve, in front of everybody. Okay, Jerry. Anyway, but we met up in Tennessee because off of that angle, they kind of squandered me around a little bit because Kevin got antsy and didn't like Tennessee anymore in about 6 months, and he moved out. Now I'm there, and they put me to Dundee. They put me to Dutch Mantel. Let me see, who else? Terry Taylor a couple of times, and then, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Jerry Jarrett has this brainstorm, and it was his idea. He said, Jackie Fargo was over unreal in this territory, and the Fargos, fabulous Fargos, and he told me the story, and I'd already heard his reputation, but I never witnessed him. Yeah. And so, long story short, he drew out the program he wanted to do, and I had an elbow injury and taken a few weeks off and kind of out of the picture. And so when I came back, had a beard, did a couple of music videos because MTV had just started then, and Jerry Jarrett was really a genius. I mean, he put instead of working against some enhancement guys, the same old, la, 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 here comes 2 guys nobody ever heard of, wrestling against these 2 guys all dressed up in tuxedos and bow ties. So who's going to win this? Anyway, we did videos, and it was way better than wrestling. I mean, the videos, even though they were kind of borderline, now they're embarrassing as hell. When I had FCW, my students would bring in pictures from when I was one of the fabulous ones, and they go, "Hey, coach, what were you thinking? What were you thinking here?" And I just have to look at them. So I was thinking how much money I'm going to make off that picture selling it.
Yeah.
And they're going, but you look so kind of funny. I go, maybe to you. but you're not a girl at the wrestling matches. How about that? So,
Yeah.
but it's like having a mullet when you're in high school and then being bald when you're old. I mean, they go like, wow, you used to have hair. Yeah. So anyway, but it was the Fabulous Ones were red hot. And here's
Yeah.
the thing. It's timing, number one. It's not because of Stan or myself. It's the right guys that doing the right job that looked good and they had some experience, and all they needed to do is formulate their precision maneuvers and then get down some kind of like repertoire of what you could do together. And then, I mean, then having the right opponents. And we had the Moondogs and the Sheep Herders, and I mean, some local guys there that were a couple of teams, and and they were good workers. In those days, and every territory, 90% of the guys were good workers.
Yeah.
It's just figuring out something to do with them.
Yeah.
So it was so different and so unique. And then it just took off, and the whole thing that to me made the difference was that we were endorsed by one of the greatest tag teams of that territory, and Jackie Fargo claimed to be our manager at the time. He never was at any of the shows, but he would claim to be that we were his, and so that gave us all his fans.
Yeah.
And one of the things, this is way deep for your show, but I'm gonna give it to you. One of the things about being a babyface in that era, 70s and 80s, is here's the deal. If you were a babyface, you had heat with a certain amount of that audience, no matter what. Because if you were a good-looking babyface with a good body, then this is what's going on. And I learned this from my mentor, Jack Briscoe. Jack told me, says, yeah, well, that's okay, but I'd rather be a heel all night long. Here's the reason. It's because that women sitting in the audience will say to their husbands, says, oh, I love Jack Briscoe. Look at him. I wish you looked like him. So that pisses the husband off right away, right?
Yeah.
Now here's the perfect example of a baby face for that era that was unintimidating. It was Dusty Rhodes. Dusty Rhodes was one of the greatest baby faces ever, but no woman in that audience ever said, honey, I wish you looked like him. And so, I mean, the men loved him. The women loved him. He crossed racial tension at a really hard time, everything. But, doing the Fabulous Ones was the only reason we got over so strong is because the Fargos endorsed us. If we'd have been trying to be Steve Keirn and Stan Lane and two pretty boy Chippendale-looking guys, man, that might have been hard to swallow in Tennessee. But they just already had some about 20 years before.
Yeah. Yeah. And later, you guys went on to the AWA, and I always heard that you were supposed to win the AWA tag titles, but the Road Warriors wouldn't drop them to you. Is that true? Tell us that story.
Nah, we won those titles. We had those titles for a while because I go to Wikipedia and read all the titles I had, and they go, wow, I didn't know it's that. I didn't know it's that. But anyway, here's what happened. It wasn't that. We had one match in Minneapolis where to give you the back setup for it, we're just coming into Minneapolis. Road Warriors are coming into Minneapolis. They are from Minneapolis. They are not from Chicago.
Yeah.
They're from the Minneapolis area. And now we're coming into the territory. And that night, Vern wanted us to do a finish with the Road Warriors where it was something we did pretty common, but it was a simple thing where we split anyway, let's just say they're getting the heat up on Stan. He has a double knockout with whoever's in the ring. And Stan lands close to the ropes, but not where I can tag him. The Road Warrior lands over on the other side, over toward the middle more. As I come in to try to get to Stan, referee goes to put me, I step right out. When the other Road Warrior comes in, referee goes with him to put him out. And as he's putting him out clear across the ring, I grab Stan and jerk him to the floor and roll in face down where Stan was. So I do a switch. So it's not like we overpowered them. It was kind of a trick finish, and we cheated, really. So when, when we got to the ring that night, and this has never happened to me before. Now I'm not a super big veteran, but I've been through a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm bouncing around in the ring, and it's a pretty nice audience. I mean, Minneapolis, that big dome thing. And I'm looking around. Here come the Road Warriors, and that music killed me every time I heard it. It's like it gave me cold chills. So they come down there. And as I'm bouncing around, Hawk says to Stan, do it our way and nobody gets hurt. And I heard it, but I'm an idiot most of the time when I start because I'm so freaked out, right? And I kind of bounce over that way, and I'm going, what did he just say? Stan looked at me and goes, he said, do it our way and nobody gets hurt. and I'm like, I was like so shocked, like, right? And then I didn't mean it this way, but I kind of go, what? And it was more like, what? But I guess the way I approached Hawk, he thought I was challenging that. And he says, he F-bombed Vern Gagne's name, and then we locked up. But he brutally beat me up for about 10 minutes. And they didn't want to get beat because all their friends were there. That all of them they grew up with and everything. Now they're going to get beat by two guys that look like they fell off the top of a cake in San Francisco. What the hell? That's what Bobby Heenan said. Yeah. And I'm going, I didn't blame him, but you do what your boss tells you to do. So here's my dilemma now. I can't beat up Hawk or Joe. There's no way. This is not the issue. Now I got to outsmart them. And I had the whole time I was selling to try to figure out how to outsmart them. And I figured it out. And finally, Hawk had given me an press slam. He must have press slammed me 10 times. They didn't have a big repertoire. So he was either rip your head off or press slam you. So I was up over his head enough that night to get a pilot's license. And when he slammed me, he kind of drilled me into the mat, which was not necessary. And so I no-sold him. I just stood up and I tagged Stan. And Stan came in and he made a little bit of a comeback, but he grounded him out. And then I went to the floor, grabbed a chair, rolled in, and shot with a chair. I just came in and when nobody going to take that chair away from me. I hit him as hard as I could hit him and just kept hitting him. And I always told him, get out of there. Yeah, I knew if Hawk got the chair, he'd kill me. So it was life or death, and that was the only thing. And then there was no heat afterwards, but this is why. Afterwards, there was a battle royal. And when we walked back into the dressing room, everybody in the dressing room in Minneapolis was a shooter in the babyface dressing room. They were all shooters. Brad Rheingans, Larry the Axe Henning, the Claw, Rasky, Brad Rheingans, and Billy Robinson. And when we walked in, they gave me a standing ovation. They saw it on a monitor. They knew what happened. And they knew that I just kind of snapped and got DQ'd. But when we got DQ'd, the Road Warriors won, but we got over better. It looked like we just didn't take shit. So I said to Larry the Axe Henning, I go, well, that's great. You guys all cheering us, but there's a battle royal. And guess who ain't going? And Larry goes, what do you mean you're not going? I says, I ain't going back out there. I said, I got away with it once, but, I'm not rolling back into that battle royal and letting Hawk come just jump on me. So I said, they ain't going to touch you. And Dave, these old guys, they kind of rallied around me and Stan. And when we went out there, man, they jerked them Road Warriors around. They snatched Larry the Axe Henning, snatched Hawk coming through the ropes and just rode him like a dog. And they were all hollering, don't mess with the Fabs. Don't mess with the Fabs. And I looked at Stan, I said, this could be good, but this could also be bad. But, we survived this. After that, Hawk and Joe, they laughed about it because they knew we were continental.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't a thing of real competition. It wasn't a thing of egos. It was, we were told to win. We didn't win, but we got over. So that's what Vern wanted out of us.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. And like you mentioned earlier, later you went to the WWF as Skinner. And that's probably where you're kind of most known for, as Skinner, because of the WWF. So talk to us about, for those of us who don't know, what's the process like when you go into the WWF of getting a gimmick at that time, and getting, how did you become Skinner? How does that process work?
Well, it's pretty much 90% guesswork. You're trying to second guess what somebody's going to like or want. And because I had been a wrestler my whole career, and this is where my book switches to. My first book goes up to 1987. My second book starts there and takes me through Skinner, takes me through PWF, it takes me through Peru, takes me through being an agent, takes me through being Doink the Clown, takes me through FCW. So it's a really dramatic transition.
Yeah.
But what happened in those days is I ran into Jimmy Hart here in Tampa, and I was in between PWF, which was a group we started here in Florida that failed, and Wandering. And pro wrestling's not a prerequisite for brain surgery, so you got to support a family.
Mm-hmm.
So you start grasping for straws. Well, Jimmy Hart was managing Hulkster, and Hulkster being high school buddy, I just said, when you see Hulkster, tell him I want to come to work up there if he could help me out. Next thing I know, I'm on my way to New York, and I knew in my mind, nobody's a wrestler anymore. They're all characters. And I had just killed 15 alligators here in the state of Florida in the first permitted hunting season, because they had been on the endangered species list for 26 years. So I participated in the first alligator harvest, and I killed 15 alligators. So I had a bunch of alligator stuff. I took a hide off of a 12-footer. I took a skull. I took a paw. I took teeth. I took everything, right? Because then I'm just grasping for straws. Now, what am I going to be? What am I going to do? So when I went in, it was Pat Patterson and Vince Jr., and I had met Vince Jr. when I had gone to the Gardens, but he wasn't smart then. They wouldn't let him in the dressing room, so I didn't really know him very well. Anyway, I start saying, well, I don't know what you're looking for, but I noticed not a whole lot of guys are wrestlers and more character-driven, and so here's a bunch of alligator stuff. Long story short, Vince goes, that's good. He says, this is what I want you to do. I'm going to put you on payroll, go home for a month, let your hair go back to natural, get rid of the bleach blonde hair, go to brown hair, let your beard grow. Don't trim it, don't do nothing with it, just let it grow ratty. And when you come back, we'll have something for you. A month later, come back, everything's cool. My hair is brown again, but it's long. I had the basically the Miami Vice looking beard for so long, fabulous ones and everything. I could grow a beard in a day, but it had gotten kind of shaggy. And he says to me, he says, okay, Steve, he says, we got an idea. Did you see the movie Deliverance? And I go, yeah, about 1 million times. Now here's Steve on the other side. Steve was working the workers, right? Now, Steve has always been stiff with promoters, but he's getting to an age where he better just be nice and take whatever he gets. So Steve's going, yeah, and I'm all excited about anything Vince is saying, right?
Uh-huh.
I'm a little apprehensive, but I'm going, yeah. And he's going, well, I want you to be one of those guys. Now, here's Steve's brain. Steve's brain's thinking I've been a fabulous one. I've been like a Chippendale dancer looking guy. I've been, you want me to be Burt Reynolds, right? So I'm going, so you want me to be Burt Reynolds? And he looks at me and he looks at Pat Patterson and he goes, hell no. and I'm going, well, who's left? I'm not playing no banjo. I can tell you that right now. So Anyway, he's going, I want you to be one of the two guys in the woods with Ned B that says, hey, boy, you got a right pretty mouth. And I'm going, seriously? He's going, yep. I said, I'm in. And it was so easy. And this is the whole thing. The only thing was doing the character in the ring was hard for me because now I'm in clothes. I've never been dressed when I wrestled, now I got my clothes on. Yeah. It's kind of like taking a shower with your clothes on, all of a sudden, going, wait a minute, I forgot to take my jacket off. No, you got to wear this and you got to wear this belt. And anyway, and then the boots, I'd always worn the same style wrestling boots my whole career. So they were like, your feet have to be very comfortable, especially if you do an hour Broadway with Harley Race. You can't do them in combat boots. Now I'm in some kind of work boot. And so there's the thing. Then the very first match I have, Vince he pulls me aside. He goes, what the hell was that? And I'm going, a wrestling match? And he's going, how in the hell could you know that much about wrestling when you're an alligator poacher out of the Everglades? And now I look at him and I'm going, so you don't want me to be able to wrestle, right? You just want me to just kind of brawl and all that? And he goes, yeah. I said, okay. So that's what I did. But the whole thing was so much fun. Man, I traveled the world. I went to Europe, all these places I'd not been. I mean, everybody was, you go to LA, all the movie stars came in there. I mean, 90% of them wanted to meet Skinner. And I'm freaking out going like, why do you want to meet this guy? But there was a character to him. So it was a lot of fun. I mean, they didn't give him a big push, and that's okay because you don't always get the ball. I mean, I don't know who's keeping score, but, I kept score of what I did. And sometimes you just play the game and sometimes you're the quarterback. So I was more like I'd say an offensive guard.
Well, shortly after that, you did wrestle in WCW just for a bit, and you teamed with Bobby Eaton as Bad Attitude. And I know this wasn't very long, but I just want to touch on this. What was it like teaming with Bobby Eaton? Because, I mean, you've had some great partners. I mean, we talked Mike Graham, we talked Stan Lane, now Bobby Eaton. And, what was it like teaming with Bobby Eaton?
Okay. Well, here's Steve. I'm giving you Steve again because this was my whole concept, Dave. 44 years I spent in this industry. I've figured it all out. And everything about wrestling is an opinion. It's an opinion. And they're all based off of your experience, what you've witnessed, what you were, exposed to or whatever. And so wherever you grew up, you grew up watching certain guys that you liked and thought were great and all this, and then you came across other new guys and you kind of fit them into your grouping. And then, I mean, to me, I'd wrestled against Bobby Eaton in Tennessee, and I'd known Bobby Eaton quite a while. But to me, he's in my top 5 ever in the wrestling industry. One of them died today. Of course, Terry Funk is in my top 5. Yeah. But my number 1 was Kurt Hennig. To me, I mean, not only was he a friend, but he was, to me, one of the greatest workers and probably the greatest worker I ever witnessed. But it goes back to now, this is Steve's opinion. Everybody's not going to agree with your opinion, so you just accept it. Yeah. But when they teamed me up with Bobby had been beat like a drum there. And, the stand gone. I mean, he got into a rut. I mean, mishandled him, whoever it was. I'm not pointing fingers because who knows. But he just got kind of into a rut. And so him going downhill a little bit, and now all of a sudden they put him in there with me, who I had just come off of being Doink the Clown up there in WWF. And so it was a good match as far as if you wanted a good tag team to, do anything. But they didn't want to really give us a push. Yeah. Because we were already, I mean, to me, I totally understand. One of the things I vowed was I would never be an old wrestler. I didn't want to ever wrestle old. Because when I first started in wrestling, I was wrestling guys old enough to be my grandpa. And I'd say, why the hell are you still wrestling? Oh, man, bad investments, didn't pay taxes, 32 wives. whatever the story was, I'm a drunk. I mean, it wasn't good.
Yeah.
So I just swore that I would never get to a point where when I walked out in front of an audience, I couldn't be a, aggressive, passionate wrestler for what I did. If I had to just cut corners and just do arguing with the fans or, be a comedian or whatever, I wasn't going to do it. And then plus, if my body stopped looking like it needed to look, I'm going to take my clothes off and go in my underwear in front of millions of people.
Yeah.
Embarrass my family, embarrass my wife, my kids, my grandkids. Hey, Grandpa, you still wrestling? They don't call me Grandpa. They call me Big Daddy. But they go, Big Daddy, you going to still wrestle? No, Big Daddy don't wrestle no more. He just does jobs for Grammy. So, but, that's how me and Bobby got hooked up. And it didn't go anywhere. They were really squandered. Eric Bischoff and I didn't get along. I looked at Eric Bischoff as he has a mark that he fell into a gold mine and he was abusing it as he was a mark. And so just back to Steve's opinion. Not everybody believes that, but, it was an observation. And so, and I'm not blaming Eric Bischoff for not doing anything because he had a ton of talent. Everybody was jumping ship. All my friends left WWF. That's why I had to bail.
Yeah.
I mean, they all of a sudden now they're going to hang Doink on me. Whoa, what a character. I don't want to do Doink. Doink was needed to do something else. So anyway.
Yeah. Well, for many years you had a wrestling school and that it ended up evolving into FCW, which, a training facility for WWE. You seem to have kind of a passion for teaching and training, and you've trained many guys over the years. What's that like, especially when you look at one of your guys like Roman Reigns, who's pretty much the guy in the industry right now? What's that passion like, and when you see those success stories from guys that you help train?
Okay, well, here's the kind of stuff that people need to hear. First of all, I did have some input to Roman Reigns, but he's a second-generation wrestler.
Yep.
He's got family up the yin-yang in the business. Mm-hmm. He's been in this business as long as I have because he was born in it. And so far as what I did to make him any better is I just used common sense. I didn't teach wrestlers wrestling moves. I didn't teach wrestlers psychology. I taught wrestlers attitudes so far as the real deal you need to know is how to get along in the damn dressing room. Because it don't matter how good you can wrestle. It don't matter what you look like. It don't matter nothing. They can do anything they want to do with anybody. And he fit the bill perfectly because he was second-generation wrestler. His name was Joe. He was very humble. He had a great body. He looked like a movie star to me.
Yep.
That's what I saw when I walked in and saw him. But he was very quiet, very to himself, and very humble. And something needs to jump out here. But so before I take credit for the thousands that I did touch, all I can say is nobody can take credit for somebody's, success. All you can take credit for is giving them your rub of your experience, as much knowledge as you can set them up with, and answer as many questions for them as you can possibly answer. But there's nobody that can predict the future. So nobody knows where the business is going. Mm. And nobody can guess whoever the boss is. If Vince drops dead, then whoever the boss, Triple H, Stephanie, whoever the boss ends up being, what they're going to want, So if I'm teaching you, Dave, let's just say you come to me and say, Steve, I heard you're the greatest trainer in the world for professional wrestling. I said, you're right. I am. I want you to teach me how to make money in the wrestling business. I said, okay, first thing I'm going to teach you is I can't guarantee that. I can't guarantee. I don't have no crystal ball. But I can tell you that if you really have a passion for this, and this is something you're going to do regardless if you're making money or not, and you want it more than you want your first girlfriend to kiss you or whatever, I mean, then you have potential. But the thing that you need to know is, how do you get along? How do you become well-liked? because if you're not well liked by your peers, you only go so far, and then they're out to get you. It's like I said in my book, and I say it over and over, is like when I started as a minnow in a sea of sharks. You know, you're everybody's competition. You're not, it's not real, but you're fighting for king on the ladder and king on the mountain. You're trying to climb this ladder. You're trying to get to the top. And the farther you get up that ladder, the more people want to kick you off. Mm-hmm. And it gets to be really scary because it can be made up stories in cars. It can be, you know, suggestive things. It can be, you know, embellished things that happen that they're trying to bury you with people that stop your progress up a ladder and all these different things. And so you can only give people so much advice, but the most important thing you can teach them is, number one, be a good guy. Be a good person. Nobody can take being a good person away from you. Nobody. They can say you're not. They can try to make others believe you're not. But if you really are a good person, it comes through and it outshines it. And it says, and then always be a giving person. Give. When you sit down with the opponent the very first time, don't say, I want to do this, I want to do that. Can I do this? Can I say, what would you like to do tonight? Anything special? How about this? Are you hurt anywhere? Is your body hurt? Did you injure something that I need to watch out there so I can avoid it? What would you like to accomplish tonight for you? And then if they ask you, which in the old days, the guy would be so flattered that they would say, well, yeah, is there anything you want to do? So, no, I'll just follow you because it didn't matter. But you have to learn to compliment your opponent, and you have to learn to be liked by your opponent. And the other thing you have to learn is to control the announcers. Nobody teaches them that. You need to go talk to the people that are talking about you. I don't care if it's Byron Kelly or, you know, whoever the announcer is. JR, go in there and talk to them. Be friendly with them. Get them to like you because they're the ones that are talking about you.
Yeah.
If they like you, chances are they're going to make you sound better than you are.
Yep.
Did you see that moonsault? It's only the 15th moonsault we've seen tonight, but I would think that was the best one. No, I mean, you know, so I didn't mean to be smart aleck on the end there, but no, I mean, there's so much to learning in the wrestling business. That I think that's going to be my third book. To write a book on how to be a pro wrestler. Because it's not movement. If I told you, Dave, how many times guys, because I was an in-between size, I wasn't a giant, but I wasn't a little guy. Uh-huh. So I made a lot of movement. I mean, you could bounce me around like a freaking basketball if you're a big guy. But it's the idea is just giving yourself to these people and letting them, you know, it takes a long time to get the reputation that you're trying to gain. And they don't usually get that much time now, but in the old regionalized days, you were always considered green as grass for at least 5 years.
Yeah.
And when guys say, how long you been working, kid? Oh, I've been working 3.5 years. Oh shit, my hands full tonight. Don't I? I mean, you know, yep, you do, because I'm not even smart yet. But you know, you got to kind of go along with everything. You got to be able to be the butt end of a joke. You got to be able to get ribbed and not get mad. You got to be able to do stuff you wouldn't normally do, but you know it's going to keep this guy from hating your guts. I mean, you know, Wahoo McDaniels hated me because the girls liked me. He just hated me in Florida. I mean, you know, he told me, he said, man, I remember the day when I got all the girls. I can't see that, Wahoo. You've always been fat and ugly.
Yeah.
So,
well,
sorry, I'm starting to get carried away.
No, that's all right.
Get off.
No, that's okay. Let's wrap this up.
Okay.
Like you said, you got the books out there. It's called Keirn's Chronicles, Volume 1. It's available all major book retailers online. Go to Amazon, pick up a copy. It's got, just like I said, we touched on a little bit here tonight, but there's so much more in the book. So go get that book and support Steve, and look out for Volume 2 coming up. Steve, if fans wanted to follow you, if you do any appearances or anything else, is there a way for them to do that online, or?
That's a good thing. I really don't have all that internet savvy and everything. When I got away from the business and running FCW and being under control of the WWE, so strict with all the technology and things, I kind of shut down. And then I'm on Facebook and some things, but I'm not a social media butterfly because I have a problem with saying the truth sometimes, and sometimes it's not a good thing, and it's not just wrestling. It could be some other subject, but like I said earlier in the thing, I got two bosses, God and my wife. And as long as I'm good with both of them, I'm a loose cannon. But I appreciate the opportunity of having me on, and I appreciate the people that suffered through the whole thing and had to listen to it thinking it was going to get better and better, and it didn't ever happen.
Oh, it was great.
I just want to say that because it is such a memorable time, and there was a lot of lightheartedness and everything, but this is a very serious time in my life, and I'll tell you why. With Terry Funk dying today, my friends are dropping like flies.
Yeah.
And I'm very blessed to have covered 4 generations of wrestling, not just my own. I mean, I just was involved, whether it was an agent, whether it was training them, whatever it was, I stayed in my industry. And he was one of the greatest ever, and he'll never be, forgotten or anything. But I just want everybody to remember his family and your prayers, and, think of your good times watching Terry Funk or whatever, and celebrate the guy's life. I mean, so, and then everybody that's watching that actually have bought the book, I appreciate anybody that's thinking about buying. I appreciate it. And I hope you're not let down. So God bless everybody. And thanks for being fans, because without fans, there wouldn't be a wrestling business. That's another thing I teach. I teach them right off the bat. Hey, those people that when you come in from the ring and you say, "What the hell's wrong?" They're not saying anything. Well, maybe it's you. But if they weren't out there, you wouldn't be getting paid tonight. So you're the one that's not doing the job, not them. I mean, they're not getting paid to come in. They're buying a ticket.
That's right.
So give them their money's worth.
Ladies and gentlemen, Wrestling Fans International Association is back. That's right, the premier fan club association of the 1970s and 1980s has been revived and is back in business. Join today. It's free at thewfia.org. That's thewfia.org. You can also join us on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/WFIA 1969.
All right, and we're back here on Wrestling Nostalgia. Thank you to Steve Keirn for that interview. Again, I hope down the road to get him on and talk to him a lot, more. There was so much stuff I didn't really even get into. I just hit what I view to be kind of the highlights of his career, some of the big, the fabulous ones and the Skinner stuff. There's so much more there, right? So much more to talk about. So hopefully we can have Steve on in the future and dive into a few more stories. Thank you for listening to us, and make sure wherever you do, whatever podcast platform that you do listen to the show, make sure you subscribe to us. And if it's an option, make sure you rate and review us. That helps us in those algorithms that when people listen to other wrestling podcasts and we come up as those suggested, right, that you might like kind of things. So if you can, rate and review us if that's an option out there. You can also follow the show on social media. The show's on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and Threads. Just look up Wrestle Nostalgia, RASSLE Nostalgia, all one word. And then you can follow me personally on Twitter at The Dave Dynasty. And when we put those posts out there, some of the things we put up and share history-wise, make sure you share those and help us network and get in front of more eyes. But especially when we share the posts that have the new episode information in them, share those. You might have followers or friends or acquaintances out there who might be interested in the show and just haven't heard of us. So your share could really get us in front of their eyes and possibly help us grow our listener base, and we would greatly appreciate that. We do one of the greatest ways to help the show, support the show, is to buy a shirt, right? We have plenty of shirts out there. It's at PROWRESTLINGTEES.com/TheDaveDynasty. Lots of cool designs out there. Go check them out. There's going to be something you love. So buy one of those. It helps support the show. And like I said, like I always say, guys, hey, there's lots of stuff going on out there. Lots of content, lots of wrestling stuff, wrestling shows, wrestling platforms, whatever you want to say. There's lots of stuff, right, that's out there in front of you. And it's not just for wrestling. This is for everything in general. Just make sure you support and talk about what you like, what you enjoy. And then the other stuff, don't worry about it, right? We don't need to bash the other stuff. Who cares, right? If we don't like it, just let it pass by. Focus on what you enjoy. Have a more positive outlook on life. But we'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode. We'll have another great guest on there. Got lots of things lined up. Lots of cool people to talk to. You're going to love it. Some historical deep dives coming up. We'll get back into the WWE history series that we started long ago. We're going to get back into that, continue that on, and then hit some other historical aspects of professional wrestling episodes with guests and so much more. Lots of cool stuff. Make sure you subscribe to us, but a new episode will come in 2 weeks. Until then, wherever you go and whatever you do, be good, be safe, and keep on growing.